In 1956, Gower was established as Britain's first area of outstanding natural beauty. It is visited by tens of thousands of visitors each year and is known for its charm, rugged scenery, golden beaches, rare wildlife and flora, attracting people of all age groups and has inspired many artists, writers and poets. Gower is also steeped in the history of its own inhabitants, with many historic attractions of Iron Age forts, early modern castles, medieval churches, and ancient abodes capturing the imagination of all its visitors. All along the Gower coast, there is evidence of the ferocity as to how nature can greet its visitors. The shipwrecks of numerous ships litter the beaches and coves. Some are visible, while others are not. Others are of legend, with stories of wealth, treachery, dispute, heroism, and friendship, surviving where the shipwrecks do not. Whether your interests are geography, nature mythology, history, or extreme sports, Gower has it all. This journey through Gower starts at Upper Clay, a small village on the borders of Fairwood Common. Fairwood Common begins at this cattle grid, which divides rural Gower and urban Swansea. The common may seem a barren place, but as you travel along the South Gower Road, you will see its beauty. The animals you see on the common have priority. Further along the common is Swansea Airport, and during World War II was known as Royal Air Force Fairwood Common and used to protect Swansea and the surrounding area from the German Luftwaffe. Today it is a recreational airfield. A short distance from the airport is Kilver Manor, an 18th century manor house used as an educational centre for young people. It was erected on a structure built by Roland Dawkins in 1855 and then called Landgrove. The next place of call is to Bishopston Valley and to the village of Bishopston, which in years past was the centre for market gardening. Now a residential area, it has had its share of fame as Dylan Thomas the poet wrote his longest poem in this house. Bishopston Valley is a rugged valley that follows the Bishopston stream and is known for its geologically and botanical rarities. Bishopston stream empties into Penclawdd Bay, a quiet cove sitting amongst a rugged hillside. At the foot of the valley are some houses, the only sign of habitation at this secluded location. This area was the hub of a busy limestone industry, which employed 200 men and women. The limestone industry helped forge ties with Penclawdd and the people of North Devon. Penclawdd was also a favourite place for smugglers who wanted to avoid custom duties. Smuggling was a lucrative business for many of the isolated communities along the Gower coast. At Penclawdd Head is Gravesend. In 1760, a naval vessel, the Caesar, carrying 100 men press-ganged into the Royal Navy service, ran aground here. About 90 bodies were recovered by locals here and buried in a mass grave, marked by this circle of white stones, which are only visible during the winter. Many of the men press-ganged into the service were from the Swansea and Gower areas, and it is from this mass grave that Gravesend gets its name. After passing Kilver Manor, you will come to the village of Park Mill, where you will see its old watermill, which has been restored over many years and is now a tourist attraction run by the Gower Heritage Centre, providing an educational day out for both school children and adults. Visitors should however be wary of the resident ghosts reputed to haunt the watermill. The first is a famous Will the Mill and former resident who ran workshops for many years in the 20th century. The other is the less well-known Lady Maliphant, who was captured near the mill in a bloody battle during the medieval period. Near the mill, a path leads to two sites of historical interest. The first set is a large field used as a scouts' camping ground, is a Neolithic tomb known local as Giant's Grave. First uncovered in the 1840s, the site has been a source of great interest to some archaeologists hoping to learn more about the prehistoric man's behaviour. Some 40 skeletons have been uncovered by excavations over the years, and the structure of the tomb has taught historians and archaeologists much about Gower's ancient inhabitants. The grave is thought to be about 3500 BC and attracts many visitors year after year. Climb the path through Park Woods and you will see an impressive hunting lodge called Park Le Breos. The name Park Le Breos is derived from the Norman family de Breos, who owned the hunting ground and on which this building now stands. Holidaymakers can stay here for a relaxing and peaceful visit to Gower. Also of archaeological interest in Park Mill is the West Glamorgan Guides Activity Centre, a 100-year-old mock Gothic former school. The next stage in our journey takes us to the tiny hamlet of Ilston, which sits beside the River Ilston and is a very tranquil place where there stands the historical Ilston Church. Legend has it that the large yew tree within the church grounds shelters Britain's earliest Christian missionaries. The church itself has been modified several times since it was first built in the 6th century. The front of the church was probably built in the latter Middle Ages. This fine church is an asset to the history of Gower. At the other side of the Ilston Valley near the Gower Inn are the foundations of the First Baptist Chapel in Wales, founded in the middle 17th century by John Miles. The very same John Miles later emigrated with his followers to the then colony of Massachusetts in North America and founded a small town which was called Swansea. From the ruins of the Baptist Chapel, follow the Ilston River and you will come to its mouth, which empties into Three Cliffs Bay. The beach here is atmospheric and probably the best beach in Wales. The subject of countless paintings and photographs, Three Cliffs, is dominated by 3 unique pointed stacks from which the bay gets its name. Situated on the edge of the valley of the Pennard Pill, with a sheer drop to its north and west and having panoramic views over Three Cliffs Bay, is Pennard Castle. Built in the early 12th century for Henry de Beaumont, 1st Earl of Warwick, this castle has had an unfortunate history. In the early 14th century, it had to be rebuilt due to extensive damage due to the encroachment of sand blown by heavy winds. This very same problem led to the abandonment of the reconstructed castle later in the same century. Even a small village and church built here in the 1530s had to be abandoned because of the sand-blown problem. The views from this point are stunning and is worth visiting for the views alone. On the opposite of the valley at Penmine, there are the ruins of the castle and church which were also overwhelmed by shifting sands. There is also a 5,500-year-old tomb near this site. Within the village of Penmine, you will see St. John the Baptist Church. It is thought this church was moved to Penmine from Park Le Breos during the 13th century to make way for the Le Breos hunting park. The current church was reconstructed during the 19th century and bears little resemblance to its original design. As you travel further west, passing Nicholston and its 19th century church, you will come to the famous village and bay of Oxwich. The beach here is a favourite with locals and tourists, and is always busy during the summer. At the foreshore of the bay, you will see the coal house, now a restaurant, which was used to store coal delivered to Oxwich Bay via the sea, a reminder of the importance of the coal industry to Wales's economy during this period. The coast around Oxwich can be treacherous and has been a graveyard for many vessels over the centuries. To visit Oxwich Point, you will need to be physically fit. In addition to a fair walk across the point's farmland, you will need to climb these steps, nearly 300 in total. Oxwich's most celebrated landmarks are its castle and church. The castle is actually a 16th century fortified manor house built by the Mansell family, who played an important role in the history of Gower between 1520 and 1580. The castle has had a blighted history. In the year 1557, Anne Mansell, who was in charge of the castle, was killed by a stone thrown during a riot as a result of a disagreement between the Herberts and the Mansells over the rights of the bounty of a French cargo ship wrecked in Oxwich Bay. In 1632, the Mansells' principal seat had shifted to Margam, and Oxwich was leased as a residence. By the 1940s, the house was in poor condition and was rescued from demolition by Lady Applesley in 1949. In state care, the castle was partly restored and is now maintained by Gower. In the grounds of this mansion-cum-castle is a 16th century dovecot. Oxwich's original church was originally founded on this site by St Ilston in the 6th century. This structure you see here was actually made over preceding centuries. The fact the church has been dated to the 6th century seems to suggest a village may have been established in Oxwich at this time. Legend has it that this ancient hamlet was grouped around the church on the edge of the cliff but was washed away by coastal erosion. But this has not been confirmed. The original rectory, sited beneath the church, was washed away in 1805. The new rectory, built to replace it, is now the Oxwich Bay Hotel. Mention should also be made of Oxwich's extensive National Nature Reserve, home to a wide variety of very rare plant and bird life. It is also a popular route with ramblers and should be treated with the utmost respect and care by all its users. A short distance from Oxwich is Penrice. The village here is very small, so it is perhaps surprising to learn that this tiny settlement was once the principal social hub of Gower, hosting markets, fairs, and even prize-fighting contests. Penrice has several historical interesting sites. The first is St Andrew's Church, which is close to an overgrown Norman motte. The structure was probably built in the 13th century, but may have been developed from an earlier work. Among its various guardians were the Knights Hospitaller, warrior monks fabled in Europe until they were suppressed by the Catholic Church following allegations of heresy. Just outside the walls of the church are two small stones engraved with crosses. It's not certain what these stones are, but it is thought they show the resting place of those who committed crimes, so that they were buried in unconsecrated ground. In the graveyard of the church is the infamous murder stone, which marks the resting place of Mary Kavanagh, a local widow murdered nearby in 1829. The inscription of her headstone reads, "To the memory of Mary, wife of James Kavanagh of Penmine, who was murdered by..." The gravestone is blank here. The 3rd October 1829, aged 75 years. Prepare for death, make no delay. She in a moment was snatched away. In front of the church on the village green, you will see the base of an old cross, popularly called the Crying Stone because it was once used by the village crier. The most imposing recognisable structure in Penrice is Penrice Castle. Located to the north of the church, the castle, first constructed in 1287 by Robert de Penrice, is an extensive, impressive structure. It has had many tenants since it was first built in the early 13th century. During the War of the Roses, it was held by Philip Mansell of Penrice, who supported the House of Lancaster. Now standing the privately owned Penrice Park, a public footpath does allow viewing of the towers and elements of the curtain or walls of the castle. Situated beneath the 13th century castle is the more modern 18th century Georgian mansion of Penrice. Set in fine landscape gardens, it has many typical Georgian features, most notably its large windows, and enjoys fine views over Oxwich Bay. First built for Thomas Mansell Talbot, this beautiful mansion is still used as a private residence. 1 mile west of the village of Penrice near Horton Caravan Park is Hangman's Cross. It was at this location that a gibbet was erected to mete out grisly fate to sheep stealers. A short distance from Hangman's Cross, just off a bridle path, is Beggar's Pit. This large hole in the ground is so called because condemned men held here would beg for their lives before being executed. Another of Gower's finest beaches is situated at Port Eynon. It will be of no surprise to learn that this is another bay and village with a colourful history, stretching back well before tourism became a staple of the local economy. The traditional quaint village of Port Eynon gets its name from an 11th century Welsh prince named Eynon, who built Port Eynon Castle somewhere in the vicinity of this village. Unfortunately, this castle is now lost to history. The Church of St Catwg, one of Port Eynon's recognisable landmarks, is clearly visible as you walk or drive through the village on the way to the beach. It is a Norman church dedicated to St Catwg, a student of St Kenneth at Llangennith during the 6th century. In the grounds of the church, you will find an impressive marble statue of a lifeboatman. The statue is a tribute to those brave souls who gave their lives saving others that sailed by the beautiful but ferocious sea. Like many other maritime communities, Port Eynon has seen its fair share of vibrant economic activity. During the 19th century, limestone quarrying and fishing were the two main industries based at Port Eynon. But Port Eynon's most famous industry was that of salt production, seen by its most recognisable structure, the Salt House. The building itself can be traced to Elizabethan times, when seawater was evaporated to produce that period's coveted commodities, salt. Later in its history, it became the home of John Lucas, who fortified the building. His reason for modifying the house in this way was quite obvious. Once you've learned of his occupation, he was a pirate who preyed on shipping in the Bristol Channel. Lucas was not alone when it came to stretching the boundaries of the law. Indeed, smuggling was a profitable business in the 18th century, just as it was in many of the other isolated communities in Gower. Another remnant of this illicit trade can be seen at Culver Hole, which lies beneath Port Eynon Point in Overton. Originally, this old structure was an old pigeon loft, though it has been suggested that it was an outpost of Port Eynon's lost castle. As a consequence of its unique design and concealed location, it was deemed perfect for concealing smuggled goods and other contraband items. Among those said to have utilised this hidden den was John Lucas. Also at Port Eynon Point, mention should be made of a memorial stone to Dr. Gwent Jones and Mr. Stephen Lee, founder members of the Gower Society. As we have seen, Port Eynon is a true marvel, geographically and historically. This is why today it is a top tourist destination, attracting many holidaymakers, particularly during the summer months. One of the finest walks in Gower is from Port Eynon Point towards Wormhead at Rhossili Bay. It is on this route that you will pass some of the most rugged, secluded small beaches in the whole of the British Isles. These include Falls Bay and Mewslade. Also on this route, 2 miles west of Port Eynon, are the famous Paviland Caves. It was in the famous cavern known as Goat's Hole that the Red Lady, a Paleolithic skeleton dated to 22,000 BC, was found. Later evidence would show a slight error in the term lady describing the skeleton. It actually belonged to a male. Paviland's Caves are two of the most invaluable caverns located along the rugged shore of Gower. Other sites of historical and archaeological interest include Minchin and Bacon Hole, carved from the cliffs near Southgate and Pulthdee Head. At Minchin and Bacon Hole, the bones of animals such as hyena, bison, elephant and rhinoceros have been excavated. These animals were thought to have inhabited this region when the sea levels of the Bristol Channel were considerably lower than they are today, and enabling animals to graze on what is now the sea floor. Anyone interested in visiting these caves should do so with extreme caution, as the routes to them are often dangerous and should not be undertaken without full knowledge of the dangers you may face. The easiest route to Rhossili Bay takes us through the villages of Pitton Cross and Middleton. It is thought that Pitton may have been home to an ancient cross, hence the addition of the word cross to the name Pitton, though it is not absolutely certain. Central to Pitton is the Great Pitton Farm, one of Gower's oldest agricultural adventures. The village has also had associations in its past with smuggling and the famous preacher John Wesley. Middleton is best known for the connections to the famous Edgar Evans, who accompanied Scott on his last expedition to the South Pole. It was in School Lane, in this small cottage in Middleton, that Evans was born. At the tip of the Gower Peninsula is the vast stretch of golden sand known as Rhossili Bay. The village of Rhossili and its natural surroundings are steeped in history, and today form the jewel in the crown of Gower's tourist industry, attracting surfers, walkers, rock climbers, hand gliders, or those seeking a relaxing beach holiday. Within Rhossili itself, you will see St Mary's Church, built in the 13th century. Unique to this church is its carved 12th century Norman doorway, the only one of its kind in Gower. In the church's graveyard is a memorial stone dedicated to the many sailors who have lost their lives on Rhossili's beautiful but dangerous shores. Inside the church itself you will find a memorial to Edgar Evans. Another of the fine walks in Gower is from the Worm's Head Hotel to Rhossili Point, and then, if you are inclined to do so, over the causeway to Worm's Head. This, however, should only be attempted at low tide. On the route from the hotel to the point, you will pass a number of sites of particular historical interest. You will see the old Coast Guard cottages, now 2 holiday cottages, and a National Trust shop. The recently uncovered old castle, Iron Age camp, and many small limestone quarries. You will also be walking parallel to farmland, known as the Vile. This is the ancient open field strip farming system of Rhossili, stretching from St Mary's Church to the headland. Crossing to perhaps Gower's most recognisable natural wonder, the serpent-shaped Worm's Head, via the aptly named Devil's Bridge, is a memorable experience which should not be undertaken without considerable care. Worm's Head is home to a natural variety of wildlife, which is why it has been designated a nature reserve. Rhossili Downs are the highest point in Gower. Here you will find cairns, scattered stones, and an ancient burial chamber known as Swain House. According to local folklore, the Scandinavian founder of Swansea, Swain, is buried here. A more modern ruin is situated further along the downs. This former radar station was built in World War II and was part of an interlocking air defence network designed to protect Britain from the Luftwaffe. Rhossili Bay, like many of its counterparts in Gower, has been a graveyard for many unfortunate vessels. Ships that have ran aground here include the Helvetia, a Norwegian wooden bark wrecked in 1887. The city of Bristol, the remnants of which can be seen at low tide, and the El Dorado, which is popularly known as the Dollar Ship, as it probably carried the dowry of Charles II's future queen, Catherine of Braganza. Silver dollars, pewter, and navigational equipment were uncovered from the vessel on 2 occasions in the 19th century. This valuable plunder would lead to a dispute between the villages of Rhossili and Llangennith over the rights to this booty. It is thought the stricken vessel floundered near Dials Lake, but no evidence of its existence has been uncovered since the 19th century discoveries. However, several people strolling along the beach have been known to find a silver dollar, so you never know, one day you may strike it lucky. At the foreshore of Rhossili Bay, overlooking the beach, is an old white building known as the Old Rectory. Once the residence of the rector of the parish, it is now a holiday cottage owned by the National Trust. Visitors should be wary of staying here, however, for the residence is reputably haunted by the ghosts of sailors and smugglers. At the opposite end of the bay, past the village of Llangennith, is Bury Holmes. Bisecting this famous landmark is another of Gower's invaluable Iron Age fortifications, but perhaps the island's most recognisable and well-known ruin is its medieval monastery. It is believed that this monastery was established as a memorial to Saint Kenneth, a 6th century pioneer of Christianity who was one of the first Christian ministries to the British Isles. It is thought he had close connections to Bury Holmes, hence the centre of pilgrimage dedicated to his memory was built on the island. At the tip of Bury Holmes are the curiously named Spaniard Rocks. Perhaps they were named after the Spanish sailors washed up here from a shipwreck. Another tale is that Spanish sailors from a stricken vessel buried their treasure somewhere off the rocks here. Either way, the name suggests there have been a strong connection between sunken Spanish vessels and the bay here. Near Bury Holmes on the North Gower coast is Blue Pool Corner, named after its supposedly bottomless rock pool, the Blue Pool. In the 18th century and one occasion in the 19th century, gold doubloons were found by locals in the rocks here. These are thought to have come from an 18th century troop transport ship sunk while carrying gold specie and soldiers to Bristol. After discovering the coins, locals began blasting the rocks with dynamite, but were eventually stopped by officials concerned by the damage being done to the rocky cliffside. Overlooking the marshes of the Bury Estuary is another of Gower's fortified manor houses, the impressive Wobley Castle. Much of what is visible at Wobley today can be traced to the early years of the 14th century, when work first begun on this fortification and under the supervision of its first owners, the de la Barre family. The basic structure of the castle was not substantially modified until the 15th century, when it was held by Rhys ap Thomas, a controversial character who went against his family's traditional loyalties and served the House of York during the bloody Wars of the Roses. It was he that added the porch block to the castle to afford a more grandiose entrance to the hall and to provide private living quarters. Now run by Cadwr, the castle is a tourism-based historical monument and houses an exposition that tells the story of Wobley and many other ancient sites in Gower. Our journey takes us to the renowned Arthur's Stone, perched on the top of the rugged Cefn Bryn. According to local mythology, the fabled stone was planted here by King Arthur, who found it in his shoe and threw it from Carmarthenshire to its current location. Touched by the hand of the king, it was said to have grown with pride, and its surrounding stones raised in high with admiration. The truth, though not as dramatic as the myth, is this is another of Gower's fascinating Neolithic tombs, constructed around 2500 BC. Indeed, scattered around the vicinity of the burial chamber are many smaller cairns. Legendary Arthur's Stone is the capstone of the chamber. But then how do we explain the split-off portion? According to legend, this is where King Arthur's sword was entombed before that Roman Celtic monarch released it. Other possibilities are it was caused by a miller looking for a millstone, or the more plausible natural phenomena of frost or lightning. Whatever the truth, this site, enjoying panoramic views of Gower, Carmarthenshire and the vast expanse of the Bristol Channel, is a parody of the glorious Gower, a place of magic and enchantment. The final step of our journey takes us to the village of Penclawdd, which is most famous for its local cockle industry, which goes back for many years to Roman times. Part of the village is perched on a high location, enjoying panoramic views over the Lougher Estuary and surrounding Gower countryside, while the main part of the village stretches along the edge of the estuary. Being so close to an estuary, Penclawdd is thriving with wildlife. Penclawdd was once a thriving seaport, and the village was renowned for coal mining, tin plate, copper and brass works. It also had a busy railway station. The original railway platform still remains today. As for Penclawdd cockles, they are collected from the extensive sandy flats in the Bury estuary, and the cockles harvested there are sold worldwide. The famous cockles can be purchased at the stalls in Swansea Market and locally in the village itself. Up until the 1970s, the cockles were gathered by women using hand rakes and riddles with the help of donkey carts. Now they are harvested mostly by men, still by hand but using tractors or Land Rovers, and processed in modern factories in the nearby village of Crofty. Other local delicacies include lava bread, washed and boiled. It is eaten dipped in oatmeal and fried in bacon fat and salt marsh lamb. All of these are more examples of Welsh cuisine and sold at an award-winning local Penclawdd produce market. The composer Sir Carl Jenkins was born and raised in Penclawdd. Our journey has taken us to many natural and historical attractions indigenous to the Gower Peninsula. Of course, the only way this area of beauty can be fully appreciated is by actually visiting it. The beaches, countryside, and historical marvels of this glorious corner of Wales are the reason why Gower is a top tourist attraction and is why the region is a true, perhaps unsurpassed area of outstanding natural beauty.